Hi, Chef Karen here. I'm going to teach you everything you need to have in your pantry to be a successful baker, and teach you a little bit about what recipes mean for baking. When it says flour, you're always going to assume that it's a high quality all-purpose flour. Like this one, there's several different brands, it doesn't matter. Regular table salt. You can use sea salt, whatever you'd like, but make sure you have salt on hand. Sugar, when it says sugar, it usually is referring to granulated white sugar. If there's another type of sugar, the recipe will tell you. There's all different kinds of sugars, but what you really need to have is basic white sugar, and of course, brown sugar. Brown sugar is something that gives your baking that rich brown, caramely texture, so you always want to have that on hand as well. Butter. For purposes of reading a recipe, butter is always unsalted butter. If there's any variation, the recipe will note if you're using salted butter, reduce salt, or vice versa. But always assume that it's unsalted butter. Another thing I want to mention about butter is more times than not, they have the measurement listed out on the cube for you, and it's easy to remember. Butter is always in 4-ounce cubes. When you see them this size, it's 4 ounces. A cup has 8 ounces, so you know that this is a half a cup of butter. So there's no need to soften it and try and get it into a measuring cup. Just know that your butter is always in 4-ounce cubes, so 2 cubes for a cup. It's always good to have canola oil on hand. Many recipes do call for some sort of vegetable oil. I prefer canola. I think you get a great flavor from it, and it's a little bit lower in fats. Also, baking powder and baking soda. You have to have both of them. Some recipes call for the baking powder, some call for the baking soda, some a combination of both. They're both low price, easy to grab at the store, and keep those on hand at all times. Some things that you'll want to add to your dishes would be your nuts, chocolate chips, raisins, so make sure and have a fresh bag of those on hand as well. When you're greasing your pans, most recipes call for a greased baking pan. Some don't, and it will not have in there grease your pans. For instance, chocolate chip cookies have plenty of butter in them. You don't have to worry about it. I like to use a cooking spray that has flour in it. Another way is to just use your oil or butter and just toss a little flour in there, shake it around. That keeps your cake or cookies from sticking to the pan. Also, you want to have a good set of measuring spoons. And unlike cooking, where you can get away with a little of this, a little of that, baking is actually a science. And as such, when it calls for a tablespoon, which is the large spoon, you want to take either the back of a knife or something and make sure and level it off. So it'll say a tablespoon. Don't use a kitchen spoon. They're all different sizes. Use a tablespoon and wipe the back of it. Same goes for teaspoon. When it says teaspoon, make sure that you're only using a teaspoon. And these measuring cups, which are great, they're marked 1 cup, a half cup, a third of a cup, and a fourth of a cup. And with this, you can do any measurement, any combination of measurements. Again, make sure and use your knife to make sure that they're flat. These are for dry measure. Dry measuring your flour, your sugar, any of your dry ingredients that you're using. This is a much better cup for your wet ingredients. Some recipes call for milk or cream, so it's always good to have a handy wet measuring cup. They're all clearly marked, so make sure and have one of these on hand. A couple other things, eggs. When a recipe calls for eggs, it's usually a large egg unless it says otherwise. But you can always assume when it says 3 eggs, you want to have large eggs. It doesn't matter if it's white or brown. They're both yellow and white on the inside. So just make sure it's a large. And vanilla. There's so many good vanillas on the market, but any vanilla extract is fine for making cookies and breads, cakes. So make sure and have plenty of vanilla extract on hand. So another thing you want to have in your pantry is cornstarch. Cornstarch is a thickening agent. We use it in puddings and certain frostings, so make sure and have that on hand as well. And it's always great to have a can of baking cocoa. Baking cocoa could be added to frosting and to cakes to make a yummy chocolate cake. So make sure and have a can of cocoa on hand as well. Be sure and check out some of my other videos where I will be baking cakes, making pie crusts, and all sorts of yummy treats.